Was Marilyn Monroe Latina? Was she Mexican American? Did she have Mexican heritage? Well, she had changed a lot of her identity. She changed her name, she dyed her hair. Does being born somewhere make you that nationality? What about your kids? I thought this would be a straightforward question to answer, but it turns out to be a little more complicated. Hi, my name is Danielle Romero, and welcome to my channel where we talk about American identity and family stories. We're going to talk about Marilyn Monroe today. Actually, that wasn't her real name, but I want to tell you why I came across this topic in the first place. I know some people are really into Marilyn Monroe, like they're so into her, and I just never really knew a lot about her, but I'm getting older. I'm 2 years away from 40. And all of a sudden I started to feel like I was dressing a little bit too young. I don't know how to explain. And so I started looking at clothes from the 30s and 40s and 50s and starting to kind of replace some of my wardrobe with stuff from that era. And you can't look at clothes from that era without seeing everyone trying to emulate Marilyn Monroe, which I won't do, don't worry. But I started seeing her. And so it was just like one thing led to another. You know how that is online. And I go from looking at skirts to seeing claims about Marilyn Monroe being Mexican or Latina, which was a really surprising claim. But I knew enough about her to know that, well, she had changed a lot of her identity. She changed her name. She dyed her hair. Could she have been Hispanic? So I wanted to find out. So what do you think? Let me know what you think in the comments before we dive into this. And if you are interested in connecting with me off of YouTube, you can join me on Patreon at patreon.com/NYTN. Let's talk Marilyn Monroe. So was Marilyn Monroe really Mexican? She was born Norma Jean Mortensen. And if you don't know who she was an iconic American actress, model, singer. She was really like the sex symbol of the 1950s and 60s, like the pinup girl. One of the it pinup girls, I'd say. Her and Betty Page are what I think of when I think of pinup girls. But despite her fame, her life was full of complexities and mysteries, which are still captivating people today. So known for her roles in classic films like Some Like It Hot and 7-Year Itch, Marilyn's image as a quintessential blonde bombshell is kind of etched into Hollywood history at this point. But behind all the glamour and fame, there are layers to her story. So Marilyn Monroe's ancestry is deeply rooted in American soil. Her family tree stretches back to the 1600s. Most of her ancestors were born, lived, and died here in the United States. But there is an interesting twist to her all-American lineage. There's a brief but significant connection to Mexico. So in 1901, Marilyn's grandfather, his name was Otis Monroe, received a job offer to help build the Mexican National Railway. This opportunity promised a really good salary, and he moved his family to a town called Piedras Negras, or Black Rocks, just across the border from the United States. So it was here on May 27th, 1902, that Marilyn's mother, Gladys Pearl Monroe, was born. So the Monroe family didn't stay in Mexico for very long. By the following year, her grandfather Otis had found a better paying job with the Pacific Electric Railway in Los Angeles. The family moved back to the United States when her mother, Gladys, was just an infant. And so Marilyn's mother grew up entirely in America after that point. And so the Mexican chapter of their family history was left behind. So people do like to claim that Marilyn Monroe was Mexican because her mother, Gladys Baker, was born in Mexico, which is like, okay, yeah, right? So fast forward to today, and we have this little piece of family history has kind of become the basis for this viral claim that Marilyn Monroe is a Latina, Marilyn Monroe is Mexican or Mexicana. And the rumor gained a lot of traction just on the internet, on TikTok, when someone had just shared a video noting that Marilyn Monroe's mother was born in Mexico, which is true. So Marilyn's mother was born in Mexico to American Midwestern parents. However, she never claimed Mexican citizenship in her whole life. And all public and legal documents list Gladys, who is Marilyn Monroe's mother, as an American citizen. Marilyn's birth certificate even shows this, that her mother was an American citizen. And so she wasn't legally a Mexican or a Mexican citizen, even though she was born there. So that's like a whole nother topic, right? And Marilyn herself was born in Los Angeles, California. She was of European descent and likely Irish, Scottish, and English, and possibly had some distant Scandinavian and German, which is pretty common among Americans with European descent. Now, in 1962, Marilyn Monroe visited Mexico herself, which I think some people were trying to interpret as maybe her embracing her supposed Mexican heritage. And she had furniture and other like furnishings purchased for her house in Los Angeles. And I think this is where stuff gets blurry. And well, people will say, well, her mom was born in Mexico, and then she loved the Mexican aesthetic, and she decorated her house like that. But the stuff I've read said that it really had more to do with the influence of her housekeeper. And she traveled to Mexico ahead of Marilyn to select items for her approval. And so it wasn't so much that Marilyn was like trying to go back to her roots. Her housekeeper showed her a bunch of items that she might like for her house, and she liked it. And that was that. There's another layer to the story about Marilyn Monroe being of Mexican ancestry, because she had a romantic relationship with Jose Bolanos, who was a writer and director that she met in Mexico. And they attended the Golden Globes together in 1962, but after that appearance, they didn't continue seeing each other, even though Bolanos later said that he and Marilyn were planning to get married and adopt a child, but I don't think that was really a real thing. There's also this mystery surrounding a sweater that Marilyn Monroe wore. And she wore it during her last photo shoot. The story kind of got attached to the story of her mom being born in Mexico. And some people say that the sweater was bought by her photographer as a prop. Other people say that she purchased it during her trip to Mexico on her own. And so there's this like another element where people are looking for things to kind of substantiate this claim that Marilyn Monroe was actually Mexican. So why does it matter? Well, I think when we talk about these big public figures, there does seem to be this push-pull thing happening where as we're uncovering hidden history here, especially here in the United States, I should say, we are finding out that there's nuance to a lot of family stories of some of the bigger characters, bigger celebrities, bigger historical figures here in the United States. But I think what also happens is that sometimes people seem to want to just have a big story to tell and exaggerate things to make it sound more exciting or exotic. My 5-year-old does this a lot. When he tells a story, I'll hear him telling a story to my husband, and it's about something we were there together. And I'm like, it wasn't quite that way, but it sounds better when you tell it. And so I think that may be what has happened here with Marilyn Monroe. Because even when there's like a grain of truth to it, like I think you could say technically her mom was Mexican, but I don't think that necessarily means what people want it to mean when they say that, right? And so by, I think, understanding the real story, we can appreciate Marilyn Monroe for all of the nuances that come with who she is as a person, and letting her still be that iconic American actress with a complex and fascinating American story. And I think that's what I liked so much about this story, is that there is that nuance there. You have a woman whose mother was truly born in Mexico. For the most part, like if you're born somewhere, like that's where you were born. And there's this discussion of, well, what does it mean to be Mexican? Is Mexican a nationality? It's not an ethnicity. Marilyn Monroe could be a Mexican American actress with her same genetic breakup, right? Just maybe without the cultural piece. And so I think it's a really important conversation, because I think it challenges these ideas of things have to be this way. There's no other way for it to be. And I think that's important, especially as we're looking into our own family stories, finding things that we may say are contradictions, and they're not. We can have nuance, peacefully coinciding with things that maybe at first glance we would have said these two things can't be true at the same time. But when we're looking at family history, and the history of identity in a place, that's often the case. And so I really loved digging into this Marilyn Monroe story. Let me know what you think. Was Marilyn Monroe Latina? Was she Mexican American? Did she have Mexican heritage? What do you think? And if you are interested in any of the other work I have done on my Mexican ancestry, or just the experience of the Mexican American experience here in the United States, I will leave a few videos up for you. Otherwise, we'll talk soon.